fat fish.
What's up, y'all? Bassin Mava here, coming at you with a new video for this week. And in this week's video, we're gonna break down matching the hatch. I was out, and this day I caught an absolute beast of a bass. This is probably one of the fattest bass I've ever caught, and I was only out for a short amount of time. I think it was only about an hour and a half, 2 hours at the most. And I threw a ton of different baits and finally made a switch, and she cracked it. But we're going to talk to you about matching the hatch and also reaction bait fishing and how to trigger a reaction strike with specifically a squarebill crankbait around the grass. So here we go, guys. So I pull up to the first spot and I start throwing the Alabama rig. There isn't a ton of grass along this section. It's more of a harder bottom and some scattered rock here or there, or some slate sticking out, but mostly a semi-flat bottom with a steep drop and a hump here or there. So I start chucking the Bama rig around, just reeling it slow, giving it a twitch here and there. Now I decide to pick up the jerkbait. I start getting up into some grass, so I want to rip that around through the grass and around the outside edge of it.
Emotional damage.
There I had a bite, but even though he got off, it was able to tell me a little bit. I got that bite right after I ripped it through a little bit of grass. So that tells me it's probably going to be a reaction bite day. And I'm going to have to make them bite by ripping it through the grass or doing real erratic motions. So I fished the jerkbait around a little bit more and didn't have any other bites. So I decided to pick up my Jackal Keyburn. It's a blade bait, and I start ripping that around through the grass. I noticed a lot of the bait that I've seen come up and surface and darting around is all small, so I figured this would be a good representation. Now I pick up the guide bait. Doesn't really make much sense because, like I said, all the bait is small, but I love throwing the glide bait a lot lately, and I'm always going to pick it up at least a couple of times to see if I can get a big one to react to it. Sometimes a bigger fish will react to a big bait, so you never know. I'm doing a pretty slow retrieve with the glide bait. I'm doing 3 normal reel handle cranks and then 2 fast twitches. That fast twitch kind of makes him react to it. You'll also notice once I got into the grass here, I stayed in that same general area. Kind of moved around a little bit, but stayed in that same general area on the front side of this point, and that was because there was a ton of bait around and then I saw coming up, so there definitely has to be predatory fish around as well. I try to go a little bit slow here, and I pick up a little 2.8 inch Kitech swim bait, and I'm just pulling that along around through the grass, trying to drop it in any holes that I can see and kind of ripping it if it gets caught up to try to trigger a reaction. Now I'm breaking down and tying on a squarebill. When the fish are up shallow like this, a little squarebill crankbait is a great way to get fall bites sometimes. So I finally break down and decide to pull one of them out. I'm tying on a Strike King 1.0 in a green gizzard color. And I'm just gonna do a real fast retrieve with that. I'm gonna burn it real quick, stop it. If it gets hung up in a little bit of grass, I'm gonna rip it through, and I'm gonna burn it again and then stop, and burn it again and then stop. With there being an abundance of bait right now, that real erratic, crazy action and that ripping and stopping is going to trigger a strike. Like I said earlier, with having that one bite right after ripping it through the grass, I knew it was going to take that kind of a retrieve to get one to react. Oh man, that's a good one. Oh man, that's a good one.
Nice.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, guys. Holy crap. That's a beast. And he is hardly even hooked. Holy crap. I'm an itty bitty crankbait. Man, that's a fatty. Look at that beast, guys. That fish is so fat. That is such a fat fish. Holy cow. I gotta check what this thing weighs. Then we gotta try to get on another one. Man, really? Only 488. Guess it's short. 488. Man, that's a fat fish though. Could have swore this big girl would be bigger than that, but guess not. Let that fat giant go. There she goes. I didn't even have the net all the way out. But what I did there, guys, is there's a ton of this little bitty bait running all around through this grass right now. And this crankbait only goes 1 to 2 foot and it just runs perfectly along the top of the grass, which all these bait fish are getting pushed around by this bass right now because they keep coming up and surfacing and running out of the water. So I switched to this, matched the hatch, and caught that giant right away.
They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that could make sense. They hate when I keep dreaming I'll be famous, but I don't give a fuck, I'ma keep chasing.
Well guys, here we are at the portion of the video where I break it down a little bit more. So this day, as I said, we went through a bunch of different baits and I figured out the fish weren't actively feeding. I did see bait busting and getting scurried around, so there were some fish feeding, but they weren't chasing down stuff. And what told me that is because they wouldn't hit the glide bait. If they were really actively feeding, they would have been hitting the glide bait. They would have been hitting a spinner bait or a chatter bait, but they didn't. And I picked up the blade bait as well. That's usually another great fall staple, especially for around grass. You can rip it through it pretty nicely and trigger some reaction strikes. But that didn't seem to work. So went a step further then, and a crankbait is a really good reaction bait. And it's a really good way to trigger strikes out of bass that aren't really actively feeding, especially if you're around some grass and you can get it to go right at the right depth. I picked up my real tiny Strike King 1.0 square bill, and I picked that up because that only goes 1 to 2 foot. Most of this grass was only 1 to 2 feet below the surface, so it was perfect. Would run right along the tops of it and I could rip it through here and there. if it got caught up or hung up on any of the taller patches. And I made 3 casts, and each time I'd rip it through the grass once it'd catch up, and I'd start and stop my retrieve. I'd rip it real fast and then stop, and then rip it real fast and then stop. And one reason why I did that is because with the abundance of bait around, you want to do something that stands out to the bass. So that real erratic starting and stopping and ripping through the grass once it could catch up is a really good way to trigger a strike, as you saw it did with that big bass. And that's pretty much what you want to do anytime you're out fishing and they're not really actively feeding. You can either catch them on reaction style strikes, like ripping it through the grass or starting and stopping. And if they won't hit that, then of course you can switch it up to slower stuff like a jig or a Texas rig. But typically in the fall, they're feeding up before the winter so they can get good and heavy and all fed up for the winter, since they're going to be all sluggish and not as active during the winter. So they feed up real hard this time of year, and even on not very active days, fish are still going to be feeding some. So you just got to figure out what they want. And this day, it was evidently the squarebill. I was throwing my squarebill on a 6.6 medium heavy fast action Enigma Ipon series rod, and that had just enough backbone so I could rip it through the grass, but a nice soft tip so I could get a good hook set in the fish with the crankbait. You want a nice soft tip with fishing a crankbait because that gives it a little bit of leeway when you're setting the hook so it doesn't rip the treble hooks right out. With using treble hook baits, it's really good to have a soft tip on your rods. But I also wanted to rip it through the grass, so I needed to have a decent backbone so I could pull through instead of just dragging along and ripping the grass out and getting stuck on my crankbait, because you ain't gonna get any bites with a ton of grass balled up on your crankbait. But the squarebill that I was using was, I believe it was green gizzard shad color in the Strike King 1.0 KVD squarebill. If you're local, you can stop into B&B Lures Tackle Shop.
Oh my God!
And you can get yourself some. They are off of 232 Factory Street in Hanover, Pennsylvania. Like I said, if you're local, you can stop in there. If not, I will leave a link in the description where you can get them online. Also, get entered into my giveaway. We're going to be giving away 5 of my favorite lures as soon as we hit 1,500 subscribers. So to be entered in that, you got to be subscribed to the channel. So hit that subscribe button right now. Got to like this video. Do that right now as well. You can comment for an extra entry, and you can also share it on one of your social media pages and tag me in it. Definitely tag me in it, or I won't see it and you won't get that extra entry. But do all that and you'll be entered in the giveaway. Tight lines, y'all. We'll see you next Thursday.